So you want to build a house. Welcome to the podcast. So you want to build a house, sponsored by Aurora Homes. I'm Scott Daly. I'm here with my co-host.
Hey.
Keith Strom.
What's up?
There he is. Today we are talking about foundations. Not sure the episode number here. We're somewhere in the 30s. Do you really care what number it is?
I don't think so. I mean, you're here. Welcome. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in.
Whatever episode number it is.
Right. So in this episode, we're going to have just a fantastically engaging conversation about foundations.
So exciting. It's the first thing everybody wants to spend a ton of money on. You know, people don't get excited about kitchens and bathrooms and tile and barn doors. They want to talk about foundations.
They want to talk about cement.
Yeah.
Which, if you're from Sussex County, and chances are if you're from Sussex County, you've never heard of this podcast. But if you were, you might just call it cement. Everyone else calls it concrete. But and I'm not from Sussex County, but I can play a Sussex County native on a podcast.
We called it cement. I grew up in Alaska, and that's what we called it.
I didn't say cement.
Cement.
Yes. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Clearly, he's
not
not from here either.
Yeah.
Or either.
Or potato.
As it were. Hi, this is Scott Daly at Aurora Homes. Do you know the one greatest regret that people that build a new home have when they move in? Believe it or not, it's that they didn't get all of the features that they wanted. And so one of the big problems that you have with some of the large production builders is the speed at which they're going to move you through the process of making selections on a new home. At Aurora Homes, we're going to draw your plans from scratch. We're going to get to know you in the process, and we're going to walk you through so that you get the home that best suits your life. At Aurora Homes, our semi-custom production system will allow you to get the better home. We're here. We're available. We'd love to talk to you about your new project. You can reach out to us at yourfuturewillthankyou.com or give us a call at 302-381-8881. Now back to the podcast. So there's so many builders. The reason why we wanted to talk about this topic is because one of the things that we want to do in this podcast is really help people get a level of education about new home construction to where they can make a better decision. You know, an informed consumer, generally speaking, makes a better decision. And being an informed consumer is not always in the best interest of the builder, so they might not tell you some stuff. We don't buy that at Aurora Homes and on this podcast, so we want you to be able to sort through some things. And so this conversation you just wouldn't have had 20 years ago, but now there's so many builders, especially large, massive companies that are building at the Delaware beaches that it makes sense to really talk through what are some of the different foundations, because when you're looking at a house and it's done and the floor's done and everything's pretty and all that, and you might not even pay attention to what kind of foundation you have, but it can have a big impact on you, on how you live, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why we're talking about it.
Yep.
And
very true.
So basically, we're going to talk about 3 types of foundations, but we're really only talking about 2. We're talking about 2 and then a variation on 2, because basically what you're going to see in Sussex County is you're going to see a slab foundation, you're going to see a crawl space, and you're going to see a basement. And the reason I say that's really only 2 is because a basement is really just a tall crawl space.
Yeah, they function the same. They both have similar features.
Right.
Yeah.
Only a basement obviously is taller or deeper, as it were, and it allows you to maybe use some of that space for storage or for future living space, depending on where you're building, depending on the building codes, et cetera. There's a lot of variables that go into that. But those are the 3 big foundations that you're going to see from the builders. And so our first one is slab foundations. And I don't know, Keith, can you just break down in general speaking what is that? When I say, it's built on a slab, what does that mean?
So if you imagine a foundation wall is made out of cement or concrete, right? And it's the perimeter of the house. It's where the framing sits on the foundation.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the perimeter of what you're framing above it. A foundation wall, if it's a slab foundation, still has that perimeter. It still has the thing that the lumber is affixed to. But on the inside of that perimeter, you have a big old concrete slab. and that is where the first floor of your house is built upon.
Right.
All your internal walls, your flooring, all of that.
Right. That's
Right on top of
that's
the slab.
basically it. So we're really talking about in the technical term would be the subfloor.
Yeah, we're not talking about the perimeter of the foundation when we're saying slab foundation. We're really just talking about the inside of that.
Right. Whereas a house that was built on a crawl space or a basement might have floor joists and then a wood subfloor. A slab is a concrete subfloor. It's usually poured directly onto the ground or onto some stone. There's a bunch of different ways that a slab foundation can be built. But like he said, the first floor, your subfloor is solid concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some pros and cons to that. In terms of how things get built and all that. Maybe you want to talk a little about how plumbing is a little different when you're pouring a slab.
Yeah, so if you're plumbing a house that, let's say, has a crawl space, the name crawl space is actually a very functional name because you can crawl underneath the house. And when you're fixing plumbing, running new plumbing, running, brand new construction, we're in our world, we're in brand new construction, so of course, when we run plumbing to the first floor, we're running it from the bottom up. Now, when you do a slab, you got to do all that before you pour because you're not going to break that concrete out every time you need to run some lines. So it does, if there's a wet bar that you want to put in after the fact, if there's some kind of sink upgrade you want to do or whatever, and it's infinitely more complicated to adjust a slab foundation in terms of its plumbing than it is to do crawl space basement.
Right. That's a really important point to think about is, when you see a house that has a slab foundation and the slab is just poured, you're going to see all these little pipes sticking out of it. And those are your future kitchens, your future bathrooms. And that is, especially relevant in Sussex County because a lot of these homes are single level ranch style homes. And even the ones that aren't single level still have at least one bedroom on the main floor and all the main living space. Unless you're near the beach or something like that and you've got like an inverted plan. But all of that goes in the slab. And I think, Keith made a great point is, down the road, hey, I want to put in a wet bar or I want to add, something else. All of your plumbing is running under the concrete subfloor, which means the only way to access that is from above. And so that is definitely one of the major differences between that versus a crawl space or a basement. It's just the accessibility of it.
Yeah.
So, and some builders actually in Sussex County will run the plumbing not under the slab. They'll run it in the attic spaces. And,
okay. And then just eject it up, like pump it?
They'll pump it. Well, yeah. Or the drains might run under the slab, but all the supplies will run. So, the sinks and the toilets will drain under the slab, but the supplies, the hot and cold water, run above.
Okay.
We think that's a historically bad idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Just because it gets cold here.
Yeah.
That's really common in places in the South, like Florida, where you don't have to worry about freezing as much. But, if you have a water line that freezes in your attic and you're not there and it breaks.
Man, I would never do that in Delaware.
No, I've seen it done. But that's a red flag, and so that's something to think about. Another thing to kind of think about in terms of one of the major differences is going to be the feel of the house. Because
that's a big one.
Concrete does not have deflection, right? Have you ever walked across a house that is not a concrete slab and you can sort of feel the house move, right? And some people think that's a negative. They're like, oh my gosh, like if you go stomping through your dining room and you can hear the plates rattling or something, it's not necessarily always a bad thing. And actually all floors other than concrete floors are designed to have a little bit of deflection, a little bit of give in them. And
it's better on your joints.
Way better on your joints. And so you get none of that when you're dealing with a concrete slab. Now, you can sort of account for some of that deflection with padding, flooring padding, especially if you're doing carpet. But, as we're recording this podcast, carpet is sort of out of style. People are putting down a lot of what we call LVP.
Yep.
which is sort of synthetic hardwood, which actually does have a little bit of padding under the bottom. But if you walk, especially barefoot, through a house with a slab versus a crawl space or a basement, you're going to feel the difference. And I think that's one of the things that's really underestimated by buyers, is because nowadays the same floor goes down. It used to be back in the day, if you put a house on a slab, 20 years ago when construction was happening, people were still using a lot of solid hardwood.
Yeah, and you weren't going to put that on concrete.
Right, you can't put that on concrete. So, but nowadays with LVP, you can put the LVP on the concrete. So you're using the same flooring, right? So since it's the same flooring, but people don't realize that just doesn't have the level of give.
So if you're looking at specs on like a existing home, like on the MLS or whatever your real estate agent brings you there, and they say, oh, well, it has LVP flooring, and you don't ask about the foundation, you could be looking at a crawl space, a basement, or a slab, and you're there on a summer day when it's hot, and you don't really notice how cold the floor is when you walk into the slab one.
You're going to feel it.
Yeah. You'll feel it in the winter.
Yeah,
like a lot.
Which is the next thing is talking about. The other aspect of comfort is not just having a little deflection, having the floor give a little bit when you're walking, but it's the temperature. And how does slabs impact that?
I mean, I'll just put it this way. I used to own a townhouse in Milton up here, and the first floor was directly on the slab concrete. It was a townhouse.
Right.
It was a 3-story type of deal, and the first floor when you walk into the foyer, I mean, super, super noticeable change from the first floor to the other floors in temperature, because ground contact is just kind of really powerful. Like that temperature that emits from the floor, it just permeates that floor on the first level.
Right. Now, builders that are going to put a house on a slab are going to tell you that slab is insulated, and to a certain degree, it really is. But there are actually ways that you can build a slab foundation that you can insulate it from ground contact, but it doesn't really work. And so, again, what has changed about Sussex County or southern Delaware is that you didn't see a lot of new construction homes that were done on slabs, and now you do. And a lot of it was because of that was the temperature. So, if you're in Florida or you're in Texas, you're in a much warmer climate, where you're not worried about that ground temperature being so much lower. But once you go down about 18 inches in Sussex County, you're dealing with the ground that's somewhere between 55 and 60 degrees year round.
Yeah, all year. Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't sound so bad. In the summer, it might be nice to have a nice cool floor. But in the winter, it's going to be a little lower than that, and 55 on your feet is brisk.
Yep.
So there is definitely, in our opinion, a comfort difference between a slab and a crawl space.
Like they may insulate. Yeah, if they insulate underneath the slab, then, in theory that helps, but there's no heat source for the insulation. So it's not like, it's like taking a Yeti, cooler and loading it with ice and then putting it in a car on like a frozen day. It's like everything else around it's cold. So the fact that okay, so you have your Yeti, you have your Yeti, but like everything else around it's cold. So everything through it is going to be cold too, because it's not being heated at all.
Right. And pretty soon, the insulation just doesn't last forever. Like, Keith's Yeti illustration is great. Yeti might keep stuff colder longer, but ultimately it's going to equalize the temperature.
Yeah. It'll take it over.
And so even if you have a well-insulated slab, sooner or later the ground temperature is going to win out on that, and there you'll have it. So those are some of the things about slabs. Now, there's one huge upside when it comes to slabs, and that's not necessarily a huge upside for the customer, but definitely for the builder. And can you imagine?
It's so much easier.
It's so much easier to build.
You get all the drains done and inspected at the very beginning, so you're just tying into them at the end. It's great.
And you save money.
It's fast.
Pouring concrete into a very shallow hole in the ground, which is basically what you're doing with a slab, versus building the house up. There is an entire section of subfloor wood and floor joists that you don't have to use, that you're replacing with concrete, which is very inexpensive relative to a floor system. There's no insulation really that needs to go underneath there. There's just so many steps that you remove from a building process if you're dealing with a crawl space or a basement, that there is a noticeable savings. And so a lot of the times you will see houses that are priced more affordably and they are on slab foundations. And so it's really interesting sometimes, people will say, oh, I found this rancher and it's 2,300 square feet and it's got beautiful flooring and great cabinets. And then I see this other rancher and it's the same size and it costs, $20,000 more and it's all basically the same stuff. And sometimes the difference might just be the foundation. And it really depends on the person. Is a slab foundation a not as high quality a way to build? I don't really think that's true. I just think it depends on preference. But we're talking about those, and Aurora Homes doesn't usually use slabs, but we're talking about those really for the concept of just education, to understand, okay, this might be one of the reasons why this home is less expensive than a home on a crawl space or a basement. But you get to make the decision. You just want to be equipped with the right information. Some people might say, I don't care if my floors are cold. It doesn't bother me. So
if you're somebody when I lived on slab foundation, I have a lot of guitars, and I used to have this room on the first floor that we would play at, and there was two problems with it. Number one, I think it was significantly louder. If you're playing guitar down there,
okay,
it the sound has nowhere to go but up, so it just doesn't go anywhere but there. And then the other thing was just the guitars needed a lot of adjusting because the temperature just severely impacted it. I would oftentimes put a heater in that room,
right,
just to try and keep,
because that cold's
going to
radiate up over time. So one of the other things that is impacting a slab also might be some of the energy efficiency. So most, if you can't really tell, we'll give you a really easy way to tell that a house might have a slab foundation. So let's say you're walking into the model, and it's not always obvious what kind of foundation there is, but there's probably two ways that you might be able to tell very easily. First is a slab foundation is not going to have a lot of steps up into the house. That's your first tell, but that can also be true in a crawl space. So that's not necessarily the best way to do it. Another possible indication would be if you look where the HVAC supplies are, and with a slab foundation, they're almost always going to be in the ceiling.
In the ceiling, yeah.
And that's because most builders that are using crawl spaces are going to put your HVAC supplies in the crawl space. They might even put your HVAC unit in the crawl space, but they're definitely going to run ductwork in the crawl. And if you're building on a slab, you're not going to run any ductwork under that slab. So your ductwork is all either in the floor system on a 2-story house, like between the first and second floor, or in the attic on a rancher, or even in the attic on the top of a 2-story house. So if you see, especially in the first floor, HVAC supplies, which are, the vents you're used to seeing, and they're in the ceiling, there's a good chance you're looking at a house that's on a slab. That's not a guarantee, because not all builders do that. On a ranch home, at least the way most people build in Delaware, that can have a pretty big impact on your energy efficiency. Because one of the things that builders are doing these days to try to maximize their efficiency is they don't want to run ductwork in an unconditioned space. And most builders don't condition their attics. And so an attic is a place that is hotter or colder. It's not conditioned like the house. Whereas just about every builder these days that's doing a crawl space is going to condition the crawl space. And we'll talk about that. But basically, on a hot summer day, if you're running your AC and you're in lower Delaware, your attic could be 130, 150 degrees. And that's normal. It's not malfunctioning. It's just hot, and the shingles are there, and the ventilation's not great. But your ductwork is in there. So here's your air conditioner, and it's trying to push, 60-degree air through ducts that are in a 150-degree space. And in some cases, the HVAC and heating unit itself might be in that attic as well. And that has an impact on your efficiency. It has an impact on your energy bills. And ultimately, if your unit is up in a space like that is that hot, it's going to have an impact on the life cycle of your HVAC unit. That if your system has to work in an unconditioned space, it's not going to last as long. And so that's another thing about the slabs. And again, we're talking about some positives and some negatives of slabs. Now, one of the positives is that, everybody gets worried. Am I going to have moisture in my crawl space? Am I going to have mold in my crawl space? And, that's something we'll touch on here in a second, but you're not going to find that in a slab.
No.
If there's water in your slab, you'll never know it. It doesn't matter. So you don't have to worry about, I went out of town for 2 weeks and it rained 4 inches. Is my crawl space full of water? Well, if you have a slab, it's not. We promise.
Yeah, or your main breaks or something.
Right.
Get a leak of some sort in the crawl space.
Done.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So we've covered slabs pretty good.
Cover slabs.
The other two are crawl spaces and basements.
Yep.
Which we kind of said off the set, off the rip here in the very beginning. We talked about them being kind of the same thing.
Right. So a crawl space, like you said, it has a perimeter wall, but then it has typically some type of floor support system. In most cases, in the Delaware beaches, that's made out of wood. There's beams. On top of those beams are floor joists. Sometimes that can be solid lumber, like a 2x10 or 2x12, which is in the business called dimensional lumber, and sometimes that can be engineered lumber, like they call it a wood I-beam or a joist.
You don't see it quite as much these days because you can't. It's a little different when you're running like electrical and plumbing through it. You can't really, with conventional lumber, you can't, drill a bunch of holes in it and stuff like that. Whereas joists or engineered joists have tolerances where you can run pipes through them and things like that.
Right. And the other big thing is just the quality of lumber has somewhat changed over the last 30 or 40 years. So all lumber that is really used in the United States in construction is farmed. People aren't going in and cutting down forests for these things. They're on tree farms. And, these trees are engineered. They grow very quickly, that they've had to revise, the strength. And so they've adjusted the building codes to accommodate this. But a 2x10 that was created in 1970 is probably stronger than the one that's created now.
Right. It's crazy when you see the difference, too.
Right.
Like in the heaviness of them and all that.
Yeah. So a lot of builders have gotten away from dimensional lumber because in 1970 you could take a 2x10 and it would span so many feet, and today the number of feet that the building codes will allow it to span has dropped. And I don't want you to hear that your house, a new house, is not as well built. It's just built with farmed lumber. A new house is much better in its construction than anything you would have seen in 1970. Don't kid yourself, but it is different. And so you see a lot of engineered wood products because it's consistent. So it's hard to get big, consistent dimensional lumber. And it's also that stuff when it comes from the mill, it's not dry. And as it dries, it can warp, it can bow, it can do a lot of things that you really don't want a floor doing. But when you put down a floor joist that is engineered, that is part wood, part epoxy, and whatever else they put into it, it is stable. It isn't going anywhere. It can get wet, which is a part of the construction process, and all of those things. And it's a much more reliable product, and it ultimately delivers a more stable, flat floor. So you just don't have the settlement issues and all those other things. So that's what your floor is going on. And so when you talk about, again, some of the same pros and cons, if you do a conditioned crawl space, which I don't know any builder that doesn't. I'm not sure that it's mandatory.
Here, I mean, in older houses you see where they're not conditioned or insulated or whatever, but new stuff's all
new
usually.
stuff. And so I think what that means, so if you go in a crawl space in a conditioned house, what does that feel like when the house is done?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a slightly colder version of the first floor. Yeah, it's virtually just if you've ever been in a basement in Delaware, kind of feels like that.
Well, in a newer house, so there's two types. So conditioned crawl space, has got airflow, right?
Yeah, I guess that's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Did you mention something different?
Well, like in an older basement, you're probably not going to have any airflow.
No.
Right.
So it's significantly colder.
Right. But this is where the HVAC system is pumping air into your crawl space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very comfortable.
Right.
Super, super comfortable. I mean, you're not going to hang out down there. It's just for access and stuff like that.
Right.
And to act as a blanket or a buffer for your first floor.
Right. And so as it warms that keeps your floor at a very similar temperature to your house, and that keeps dehumidified air going into your crawl space, especially which is a thing in the summertime. So you've got air-conditioned air, which has been dehumidified by your HVAC system, and that's pumping into your crawl space. The difference is it's not taking air out of the crawl space. So in your house, you have return air ducts that are bringing air back to the HVAC system to be heated or cooled, and they don't suck air out of the crawl space, but they do push air into the crawl space, which gives it a little bit of an overpressurization, which keeps it pretty close in temperature. You know, what Keith said is 100% accurate. It's probably a couple degrees cooler year round, but only a couple degrees, and it's comfortable down there. And so that it has a big impact on the comfort. Having a wood subfloor that has some deflection, has some give in it, is going to be a difference in the comfort while you're walking across it. But there are some downsides, right? Because just in terms of the complexity of the home construction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you've got when you do a crawl space, you've got beams, you got columns. Oftentimes we use steel columns. Sometimes you do them out of block or piers. You do that kind of thing, and then you got your joists. Your joists run on the beams. So it's definitely more complicated, without a doubt, to do a crawl space. But the cool thing is, on the second floor, it also, like, if you do a crawl space foundation and you have a 2-story house, your second floor is just a lot more comfortable because, your first floor then acts like a blanket for your second floor, because you have heat loss on the second floor, but you're not getting a lot of air transfer on the second floor. You're getting a lot of air transfer from your first floor up to your second. Right.
So it's just, it all around is a lot more comfortable of a thing. So now, the downside is you can get water in your crawl space.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's possible. The modern crawl space with drains, with sump pumps, insulation, with vapor barriers and plastic on the bottom to keep everything out. There's always a storm that Mother Nature can create that is going to make all those systems fail. And so, you're never going to be 100% sure. And there's such a racket with that here. When you get this big rainstorm and somebody gets water in their crawl space and all of a sudden they feel like they're going to die. And they are going to die, but probably not from that, because we're all going to die. That's just the reality. But I don't think it's the crawl space that's going to kill you. Because there's typically not a lot of air transfer between your crawl space and your house. And there's not indoor air quality standards. So people call and they freak out and they call these services that'll come out and say, oh, we're going to encapsulate your crawl space for just oodles and oodles and oodles of money.
Like thousands upon thousands.
Tens of thousands of dollars. And, they're really going to put up a big plastic barrier to keep all the bad stuff out. They're not going to stop the bad stuff getting in your crawl space. They're just going to put a layer of plastic down so that you can't see the bad stuff that's getting in your crawl space, which honestly is not a bad solution. But then you look in their warranty and it's like, I have yet to run into a crawl space or basement remediation company that's going to say your crawl space is going to be dry. They won't say it. Their warranty goes, as far as the warranty on the sump pump that they're installing, which they probably bought from Lowe's or whatever, or that's it. And if that thing breaks, then there's no warranty. That's just the way it is, because stuff happens.
Yeah, it's there's no possible way for them to fully guarantee. It's just not reality.
Right. So that's it. And, you're not going in your crawl space. There's going to be a lot more sort of stagnant air in your crawl space. But it's not really part of your house. And it can be musty and dusty and all those things and be performing exactly as it should be, because it's keeping your house comfortable. It's letting you walk across wood instead of cement. It is providing you with some energy efficiency, because you're running your ductwork in a space that is the same temperature as your house. And you paid more for it, but generally speaking, it's more valuable. So what's the difference really in your mind between a basement and a crawl space?
The foundation is taller, and there's, it's pretty much it. I mean, you do have to do different things with the grade. Typically, you're going to hold a basement a little bit higher, and in terms of the the basement being functional living space, it can be.
Okay.
And in a crawl space, that's like you mentioned earlier, there aren't standards for that. You're not going to finish a 4-foot crawl space for much any reason.
Nope.
A basement, you can like legitimately use that space. Typically with the basement, you're going to have interior steps down from the inside of the house to the basement. With the crawl space, it's just an access hatch. We put ours in the garage, typically. Some people put them on the outside of the house.
Right. And why do you put those in the garage?
Critters, to eliminate weather issues. Like sometimes used to work for a company, and we put them on the outside of the house, and we would put these drains inside so that if it rained, the water that would fill up the access well would go into the sump and then pump it out to keep the well free of water. And sometimes it would get clogged, and then water would find its way into that access hatch on the outside of the house, and pretty soon you have water going into your into your crawl space. Now we put them in the garage, and it keeps everything dry. It keeps critters out. It's just better.
It's just better. Okay, that's an interesting design point. Is there a difference in the way that you do walls from like how the actual wall is done with you're doing a basement versus a crawl?
They're usually, for us, they're 8-inch thick poured walls. So okay. I mean, not that we see.
Right.
Sometimes with the crawl space though, if you do a block wall, right? Like in this area, you still see block walls. We do them too. Depends on the community or what you're doing for the specific property, but you're not usually going to see a block foundation for a basement.
Right.
But you'll see them for crawl spaces. That's very normal. You're not nearly as concerned with water penetration on a crawl space that you are a basement, because with basements you're trying to, you may need to use that space for living.
Right. And there's a time factor too that if you're going to do a basement and the wall is 8 or 9 feet tall,
it just takes forever.
That's a lot of block. And it's a lot of seams that you don't necessarily have, and that doesn't mean, anything can leak. So, but just in terms of size and cost, a block wall isn't any less strong or anything like that. People are like, "Oh, is this not strong enough?" And I'm like, your house really isn't that heavy. You can take block foundation and probably put, I don't know, 10 stories on it before, concrete's pretty strong.
Yeah.
I don't know, but you got your 1-story house and you're like, is this going to be strong enough? And it's like, well, are you going to park a tank in your living room? I mean, you need to get a slab if you're going to do that. If you have a tank, that's probably something you ought to tell your builder. So about my tank. Yeah, that's...
Yeah, you got to make sure
right.
You're prepared for that.
And check with your local HOA about, their policy on heavy armored military vehicles.
Yeah, they'll almost certainly have some requirements on their... They'll have a section on tanks specifically.
Actually, they might not. You might be able to park your tank wherever you want.
Only in season, though.
Right.
Otherwise, you gotta...
When it's not tank season, you have to move your tank.
Yeah. You gotta find a spot and shrink wrap it and all that.
Have you ever driven a tank?
No.
I don't think our floors are rated for tanks.
No, I don't think many are.
No. But, anything goes these days. So...
Yeah.
So, so the upside of basements, and what we usually tell people, at least in the new construction world, is that the other big thing is that a basement is usually a very expensive option on a new home if it doesn't come included. And if it comes included, the base price of the house is going to be higher because it's a very expensive thing. But in a sense, you get a lot more usable space. And so... if you're able to do a basement, we always recommend it. Even if you're thinking you might not need it, just for resale value, just for something down the road, you're creating a very large underground space that can be finished in your house. And it gives you a lot of flexibility to add significant square footage at a very inexpensive price.
Yeah, it's so much cheaper if you already have a basement to add space.
And so people that come down here, they're like, oh, we're near the water. We're going to have a basement. And it's like, well... proximity to the ocean can be an issue to a certain degree, but it's really not the issue. The issue is, there's groundwater here. It's usually not that far down, but it varies from community to community. And there's some places where you don't want to put a basement, you can't put a basement, and it's not because of the ocean. It's because the groundwater is higher because of some other geological issue. Around here, there's layers of clay intermittent with the sand. The clay holds the water, and there you go. But literally, you can drive down the road 2 miles to a different place that doesn't have those clay layers, and you can put a basement, and you're not going to have groundwater issues in a basement. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to rain so hard one day that water won't come in your basement, because it happens. But it's still worth it. You know, we're always encouraging people, if they'll let you put a basement in, do it.
It's one of the best things you can do. I mean, you get storage too. Like,
right.
It's really nice.
Tons of storage and just the flexibility. And if you never use it, and you only use it for storage, but you get to resell the house with a basement, I think it's a real no-brainer of an option if you can afford to do it. You're going to get your money out of it, even though it's one of the more expensive options from a builder. It's still, when you think about what it's doing, it's actually one of the best values. From a builder.
Yep.
And yeah, we highly recommend it. It adds a little complexity to the process, but if you can do it, you should.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there anything else that we need to talk about on foundations?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say to tag onto the basements, I would just say there are preventative measures that we do to keep groundwater from being an issue. We do strip drains around the footing, which is basically like a big French drain that's responsible for keeping water out. We do plastic barrier before we pour the slab to keep the water down underneath the slab.
Mm-hmm.
And then, obviously the initial testing of the soil to make sure that water is, it's down far enough that we can do a basement. There's lots of things that go into it, but if you plan properly, you should have a pretty good shot at keeping your basement nice and dry. So
there you go. That's what you need to know. So there it is. Now, 20-some minutes later, you're an expert on foundations. Free of charge. You're welcome.
Yep.
We are the... You're now among the experts. But again, it's that same idea that the more you know, the better of a decision that you're going to be able to make, because what's best for you, and understanding, hey, these are the features I need in my house, and taking some of the emotion maybe out of the home buying experience so that you can make a decision that you're going to be happy with for years to come. So with that being said, this is the So You Want to Build a House podcast. I'm Scott Daly.
I'm Keith Strom.
Have a great day.